We've all heard the stories about the mountains, close-knit families, folks who keep to themselves, a simpler way of life, a world away from the noise and hurry of the cities, but almost nobody talks about the uncomfortable parts, the silence that settles behind the trees when the sun goes down. What happens when keeping to yourself goes too far? When a family turns inward and the family tree stops branching out and starts to curl into a tight, thorny circle. In the tangled, deep-shadowed hollows of West Virginia, there's a story like that, a true one, etched in county ledgers, forgotten academic papers, and the very day of its victims. It's the story of the Miller clan, a family line that produced 7 generations of rampant inbreeding and incest. It begins in a specific place at a specific time with a single family that locked the world out and then locked themselves in. How does this happen? What does it actually look like on the ground, year by year, death by death, birth by birth, for over a century? The story is in the records, in the cold, hard facts. If you value documented history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from West Virginia State Archives, county birth registries, and university sociological records. Now back to the story. The story starts in the year 1891. The place is a narrow, unnamed hollow, twisting off the Guyandotte River in Lincoln County, West Virginia. The land here is vertical, steep hillsides covered in a thick canopy of oak, hickory, and, at the time, towering American chestnut trees, not yet touched by the blight. The soil in the creek bottom is thin and acidic, full of sandstone and shale that tears at a plow blade. This is not easy country. The man is Jacob Miller. He's 30 years old, a hard man with thick shoulders and calloused hands, and a quiet, watchful demeanor. He's a veteran of no war, a farmer of rocky soil, a man who owns 312 acres of dense woods and unforgiving slopes that nobody else wants. He bought the parcel for 50 cents an acre from a land company that considered it worthless. He builds his one-room cabin from poplar logs he felled himself with a crosscut saw and a broadaxe, notching them to fit together without nails, which were a costly luxury. He chinks the gaps with a mixture of red clay from the creek bank and moss scraped from rocks. The roof is made of hand-split oak shingles. Inside, the floor is packed earth, hard as stone. A single stone fireplace provides heat for the brutal winters and a place for the one cast-iron cookpot the family owns. That same year, he marries his first cousin, Sarah Miller. She is 22, a strong woman who knows how to work. They share a grandfather, a man named Jedediah Miller, who had settled in the county 30 years prior. In a place this isolated, a place with few roads and fewer people, marrying a cousin isn't unheard of. It's a practical choice. But for the Millers, this isn't an exception. It's the beginning of a rule. Over the next 15 years, Jacob and Sarah have 9 children who survive to adulthood. 4 boys: William, born in 1892, John, born in 1894, born in 1897, and Sebuel, born in 1901. 5 girls: Mary, born in 1893, Elizabeth, born in 1896, Hattie, born in 1899, Clara, born in 1903, and Martha, born in 1905. They grow up knowing only the hollow, Their world is bounded by the ridge lines. Their education is learning to read animal tracks, to know which mushrooms will kill you and how to stay warm in the winter. They have no books except a single tattered King James Bible from which Sarah sometimes reads. They have no toys except those Jacob carves from scraps of wood. Their lives are governed by the sun and the seasons. By 1910, the second generation is ready to marry. Jacob's oldest son, William, is 18. He marries his own sister, Mary, who is 17. They don't go to the county courthouse for a license. A traveling preacher, a gaunt, circuit-riding man named Elias Hatfield, presides over the union in the front yard of the cabin. He accepts a meal of squirrel stew and 2 cured hams as payment, blesses the couple, and moves on. A year later, in 1911, the second son, John, who is 17, marries the second daughter, Elizabeth, who is 15, in a similar ceremony. The family tree isn't a tree anymore. It's a wreath. The genetic loop is pulled tight at the very beginning. The other 5 children will go on to marry their own first cousins from a neighboring hollow, bringing a sliver of new blood in. But the core of the family, the 2 main lines of descent, are now locked in a self-perpetuating cycle. Of the 12 children born to these 2 sibling couples in the following decade, only 8 will survive their first winter. The consequences will ripple through the next century, slow at first, and then with devastating speed. The third generation is born into a world where your father is also your uncle, and your mother is your aunt. It's the 1920s. The children of William and Mary and the children of John and Elizabeth grow up together in the same small clearing in 2 new cabins built next to the original homestead. They are what geneticists call double first cousins. They share all 4 of their grandparents, who are the same 2 people, Jacob and Sarah. Genetically, they are as close as full siblings, and they too marry each other. A boy named Thomas, son of William and Mary, marries his cousin Hattie, the daughter of John and Elizabeth, in 1931. They are 16 and 15 years old. Their marriage is recorded in the county seat of Hamlin. The clerk, a man named Abernathy, who had worked in the courthouse for 40 years, notes the parents' names in his looping cursive right there in the ledger. Parents of the groom, William Miller and Mary Miller. Parents of the bride, John Miller and Elizabeth Miller. He doesn't look up, doesn't ask a question. He'd seen plenty of cousin marriages. This was unusual, but not illegal. He stamps the book and calls for the next couple. By now, there are 4 crude cabins in the hollow. The family has grown to over 30 members, and the outside world is starting to notice in small, fleeting glimpses. A county health officer, a man named Frank L. Johnson, makes a visit in 1934, investigating rumors of children not being enrolled in the new county school system. His official report is brief and clinical, but his private journal, archived at the state capitol, tells a more detailed story. He writes, "The hollow smelled of wood smoke, damp earth, and human waste. The Miller children were shy to the point of being feral. They hid behind trees and peered from the dark, windowless cabin doors. Of the 11 children under the age of 10 that I could count, at least 4 had a peculiar shuffling gait. Their feet turned inward, a sign of what I now know to be ataxia. Several had a milky cloudiness in their eyes, congenital cataracts so advanced that they were likely blind. None would speak to me directly. When I tried to ask a woman her name, she stared at my mouth as if she didn't understand the sounds, then picked up a hoe and stood between me and the children. She never said a word. Johnson's report to the county board concludes that the family is self-sufficient and poses no threat to public order. No action is taken. The family is left alone, deep in their wooded fortress. The fourth generation is born just before the Second World War. The pool of genes is now critically small. It's like making a copy of a copy of a copy. Every flaw is magnified. Every hidden error in the genetic code is brought out into the open. Recessive genes that are harmless when you have only one copy become a certainty when both parents carry them. And in the Miller family, everyone carries the same ones. The Great Depression grips the country, but in the Miller Hollow, little changes. They have no money to lose. They live off the land. The Second World War rages across the globe, but it is a distant echo. In 1943, a draft officer, a private first class Eugene Shaw, is given a list of names and tasked with delivering draft notices. He finds the name Samuel Miller, son of John, with a listed address of Guyandotte River, Retent 4. He spends a full day trying to locate the hollow, parking his Jeep where the dirt road washes out, and hiking for hours up the creek bed. He gets turned around by the confusing steep terrain, hearing strange whistles and calls from the woods around him that he assumes are birds. He never finds the clearing. He returns to his barracks and reports the address as locatable. The man, effectively, a ghost. The isolation is now absolute. It is in this fourth generation that the physical signs become undeniable. A child is born with fused fingers, a condition called syndactyly. Another is born with a cleft palate. A third is born with aniridia, a condition where the iris of the eye is missing, making the eyes look entirely black. They are sensitive to light and nearly blind, spending their days in the shade of the cabins. By the 1950s, the Miller clan is a local legend, a ghost story. People in the nearest town, miles away, talk about the strange family up the creek, the family that speaks in hoots and hollers, the family that shoots at strangers with shotguns full of rock salt. Most of it is exaggeration, but not all of it. In 1952, a timber scout named Richard Davis hikes up the hollow. He describes the scene in his deposition. The first thing he noticed was the silence. The normal sounds of the forest, birds, squirrels, died out as he approached the clearing. Then he saw them. He saw a man splitting wood not with an axe, but by smashing it repeatedly against a large rock. He saw children who did not run or play, but sat listlessly on the ground, staring into space. He described their movements as uncoordinated, like puppets with tangled strings. He leaves the hollow that day and never goes back. In 1960, a young census taker, a woman named Patricia Neal, fresh out of college, is assigned the remote areas of Lincoln County. She finds the hollow. In her official report, she writes in the margins of the form for household hash 217. Occupants, 17 estimated. Names refused, unable to provide. Head of household non-responsive. Communication not possible. The family is a blank spot on the map, a statistical void. The fifth generation comes of age in the 1960s. They have no concept of the outside world. Their language is now so devolved, it is barely recognizable as English. They are a tribe unto themselves, with their own rules, own language, own genetics. It is this generation that attracts the attention of a sociologist from West Virginia University, a Dr. Alastair Finch. He hears the stories, the rumors from the census taker, the timber scout, the local folklore, and decides to make the Millers the subject of his life's work. It takes him 6 months to gain enough trust to even approach the cabins. He leaves gifts of salt, sugar, and tobacco on a stump at the edge of the clearing. Day after day, he just sits there 100 yards away, making no move to approach. Finally, an older woman walks out and takes the offerings. That is the beginning. If you value documented history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from university sociological archives and states, medical records. Now, back to the story. Dr. Finch makes his first successful contact in the spring of 1971. He spends the next 2 years observing the Millers, visiting them several times a week. His field notes, over 800 pages long, are the most detailed account of the family that exists. He documents the 6th generation. He finds a family of 41 people, all living descendants of Jacob and Sarah Miller. He is not a medical doctor, but he meticulously documents what he sees. He suspects various genetic syndromes based on his observations. He writes, Subject T, a boy of approximately 12 years, exhibits classic signs of Carpenter's syndrome: webbed fingers and toes, a high pointed skull, and significant cognitive impairment. He notes, the prevalent shuffling gait across the population is consistent with a cerebellar ataxia, a neurological disorder affecting balance and coordination. He observes that the family is led not by a man, but by the oldest surviving woman, Martha, one of Jacob's original daughters, now in her late 60s. She is frail and nearly blind, but she directs the daily work with sharp cries and specific hand gestures. She is the queen of this strange, broken kingdom. He tries to gauge their understanding of the outside world. He brings picture cards, a car, a house, an airplane. They stare at the images with blank incomprehension. He shows them a photograph from a magazine of the Apollo moon landing. They show no reaction. They have no concept of a moon beyond the light in the night sky. They have no concept of a nation or a president. Their world is the 312 acres of the hollow. Nothing exists beyond the ridge. Finch's 1974 paper, Genetic and Social Isolation in an Appalachian Kindred, is published in an obscure academic journal. In it, he details their diet: squirrels, rabbits, the occasional deer, supplemented by corn, beans, and foraged plants. He notes signs of severe malnutrition, rickets, and parasitic infections in all of them. He estimates the average life expectancy within the hollow is less than 50 years. The paper causes no public stir. The Millers are an academic curiosity, then they are forgotten again. The 7th generation is born in the 1980s and 90s. They are the great-great-great-great-grandchildren of Jacob and Sarah Miller. They are born into a genetic wasteland. The compounded recessive genes now express themselves in the most tragic ways. Some are born with anencephaly, a condition where a baby is born without parts of the brain and skull. They live only a few hours and are buried in unmarked graves behind the cabins. Others are born with fused limbs or hearts with holes in them. The rare blood disorder, methemoglobinemia, which turns the skin blue, is now common. By the year 2000, the outside world finally crashes in. a new state law requires all rural residences to be registered for a 911 emergency system. A county mapper named Dave Klein is sent out to assign a physical address to the Miller property. Using satellite maps and old county surveys, he finds a cluster of structures that have no road, no address. He hikes in. He later told his supervisor it was like finding a lost tribe. It was like walking back in time 200 years. He makes a report. This time, something is done. Social services, accompanied by state police, arrive at the hollow in October of 2001. The line of official vehicles at the bottom of the hollow is the largest intrusion of the modern world in the family's history. The social workers and officers are met with a scene of unimaginable squalor. The smell of human waste and rot is overwhelming. They find fewer than 15 remaining family members. The oldest is a man in his 60s. The youngest is a pair of teenagers. The people are terrified. One of the teenagers, a boy later identified as Caleb, fights back, not out of malice, but pure animal fear, biting and scratching at the strange people trying to touch him. The state takes the children and teenagers into custody. The adults are placed in state institutions. The medical examinations that follow reveal the full scope of the tragedy. Rickets from vitamin D deficiency, dangerously low hemoglobin, a host of congenital heart defects, profound hearing and vision loss, and cognitive abilities that measured in the lowest possible range. In the institutions, they could not adapt. The noise, the lights, the rules of the outside world were a constant torment. Most remained nonverbal and withdrawn for the rest of their short lives. For the first time in 110 years, the hollow is quiet. The Miller clan, as a self-contained, isolated unit, ceases to exist. The cabins rot and collapse. The forest grows over the paths and the small, neglected garden plots. The story seems to be over, a tragic but simple tale of isolation. But there's one last detail, found not in a sociologist's notes, but in the dusty, leather-bound deed books of the Lincoln County Courthouse. It's the original deed for the 312 acres filed by Jacob Miller in 1891. Attached to it is his will, filed in 1920, just a month before he died. The will is unusual. It's written in his own hand. He doesn't leave the land to his children by name. He leaves it to a concept. The land and all its timber and mineral rights is bequeathed in perpetuity to the blood of my blood born and dwelling within this hollow. A second clause makes his intent brutally clear. Any heir who marries an outsider or who removes himself or herself to live beyond the borders of this land shall be immediately and irrevocably disinherited. Their claim and the claim of their offspring shall be null and void. A final clause adds another layer. No sale of the land is permitted, only the lease of its resources, with all proceeds to be divided equally among the blood kin who reside upon it. Research into tax records from the 1890s reveals that just after buying the land, Jacob Miller had sold the timber rights to a logging company for a fraction of their value. He had been cheated. The will, written 30 years later, reveals a chilling motive. This wasn't just about isolation. It was a cage built on purpose. Jacob Miller, feeling cheated and betrayed by the outside world, created a system to ensure that the land and any future wealth from coal or gas would never, ever leave the family. He locked his descendants in a genetic prison to protect a patch of dirt and rock. He sacrificed his own bloodline for 312 acres, 7 generations, 110 years, trapped by a fence made of blood.